Namaskar and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology, debunking mythology. Sattology means science of truth or study of truth, and opposite of that is mythology, which means science or study of fake, lie, or imagination. And I must repeat again, Sattology builds your identity, mythology destroys it. And it was very commonly seen that the mythology term was used for histories of Native Americans which Europeans wanted to ignore. So it was classified as ancient history and no archaeological proof, no astronomical proof, and no proof which they wanted to research actually also. But gradually, the world over, especially in India, the word was coined for India, especially in India, the Ramayana and Mahabharata texts actually proved them wrong because the history of Ramayana is mentioned in Valmiki Ramayana itself. And the history of Mahabharata is mentioned in Mahabharata itself. And also along with a lot of geographical proofs, which have never changed with time. And rivers can change time, they can change the course, but the mountains don't. Mountains don't change the course. And the reference of mountains is considered more important in Ramayana and Mahabharata. And you'll see that, you'll see how Sri Ram turned north before Giriraj. Giriraj is called Rajgir today. And then Bhagwan Ram went south from Mithila. Again, like the point which I'm trying to south actually southwest. But the point which I'm trying to say, the mountain positions are from paramount, and this are paramount, and that's what the Western uh, historians could not disprove. Now that came the game of gaming, archaeological dating. We all know that most of the techniques cannot accurately go beyond 4,000 years. And that's why, for many of the Abrahamic scholars, the world began at 6,000 years before Christ. So funny. Many temples itself in India are more than 10,000 years old. And not only that, many pyramids and many temples in South America are more than 10,000 years old. So it's just a complete lunacy to say the world did not exist before them. And most of those buildings are far more archaeologically developed than what we have currently today or on the par. We might have air conditioning, but they were built with stones with natural air conditioning. So I have a very, very special guest today, and he kind of led Hindu Students' Council or formed it. I do not know exactly. I'll ask him now. So let us welcome Parth Parihar.
Namaste, Adityaji. Thank you so much for having me on your show this morning.
Thank you so much. You're most welcome. So, Parth, you are fluent in Hindi and you're fluent in
G,
English.
right.
So, he answered also twice, G and right.
Yes.
So, the show will be primarily, we'll make it Hindi English a little later on. So, my first question to you is how did the Hindu Student Council come into existence? What do you say?
Yes. So Hindu Students Council, or HSC, was founded in 1990. And it was founded in 1990 as a basic response to the fact that many Indian students were coming over to the United States. And the rate at which they had been coming to study at US universities was increasing the most during that time period. And what many students found once they came to the US was that there was no space within college campuses where these students could actually celebrate their culture, their religion, Sanatana Dharma, on campus. And so they wanted to create a group, a space where they could do so. So the first Hindu Students Council chapter was started at the University of Maryland in College Park. And since then, HSC has grown a lot. HSC's vision and mission, though, has basically stayed the same. We provide opportunities for students, both of Hindu background as well as from the general community, to learn about Hindu Dharma. We provide a space also to advocate for issues that affect the Hindu community. And finally, we also provide students and other interested parties opportunities to do seva and give back to the broader community, both, again, the Hindu community as well as the communities in which we live here in the US. So that's the basic kind of mandate of HSC. And I would say I definitely didn't found HSC, definitely not. It was founded in 1990 by visionary leaders in our community. You might know Kanchan Banerjee. He was one of the founders. Gokulji Kunnat, who's based in Atlanta, was another one of the founders as well. So since then, again, there have been many leaders of HSC. I was lucky enough to serve as president of Hindu Students Council when I was a graduate student at Princeton from January 2018 until November 2019. So for almost 2 years, and luckily not during COVID, which was a really challenging and also a very time of adjustment for us. But the new leadership has really done a great job in adjusting to these challenges and taking HSC forward and really expanding our footprint here in the US and Canada.
So why the name? So the word Hindu, draws ire, like from many people, many groups, but there are Muslim student councils also. There are other religion, Christian student councils also. Jesuits are there. Why is that specifically Hindu student council? What do you say? Why do you see the reason actually?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something that we get asked all the time is why aren't you Indian Students Council or South Asian Students Council, right? So I think one of the important things to keep in mind is that a lot of these Indian student organizations and South Asian student organizations, while they are a good venue to celebrate kind of Indian culture and to celebrate other things related to India, for instance, exchange of ideas, social movements that are happening in India, the politics of the day, all of that. They're not good venues to actually learn about Sanatana Dharma. They're not good venues to learn about Hinduism, and they're not good venues for students to actually connect to their Hindu identity. So the founders of HSC wanted to be very clear that we were a Hindu organization, that we are geared towards people having the opportunity to learn about and to exchange their ideas and their practice within Sanatana Dharma, and not just for India. And this is also an important point because people often forget, in fact, that 10% of Hindu Americans are not from an Indian background. We have many Latino Indians, there are many African American, and of course, white American Hindus as well. And to provide a space for these, for people of these backgrounds to also connect with their spiritual tradition was really important. I can give one account of a student who was from a Caribbean background, who, when she went to create a Hindu Students Council chapter at her university, the kind of administrator who was in charge of student groups, she asked her, why do you need to create an HSC? We already have an ISA, an Indian Students Association, on our campus. So sometimes people have this misperception of Indian equals Hindu. And of course, that isn't the case. There are many Hindus who aren't from an Indian background, who we should be embracing and bringing in to our organization and to our community. And there are many Indians who, of course, are also not Hindu. So to be very clear about who our identity was, to stick to that identity and to make sure that we were actually able to embrace the full extent of Hindu heritage. That's why we were very clear that we were Hindu Students Council from day one.
So you mentioned about cultural events. So am I referring to dances and events like Diwali, Holi, these kind of things?
Yeah, exactly. So many Indian students associations, like I was mentioning, they will do cultural activities like celebrating Diwali through, let's say, like a cultural program. They might celebrate Holi through with playing with colors, for instance. But there's no kind of underlying discussion of why these traditions exist. And so in Diwali, for instance, you won't have a puja. You won't have any sort of deeper cultural activity either, right? So you won't have people doing rangoli with Lakshmi Ji's feet, right, on the door of the venue of the event either, right? So there's these deep symbols related to our religion, to Sanatana Dharma, to Hinduism, that are inherent in each of these festivals, that in order to accommodate the fact that this is an Indian students organization, a lot of these symbols and a lot of this deeper meaning behind our festivals is actually taken out. For instance, in Garba, also this happens often when you have Indian Students Association or ISO or ISA run Garbas, which again are very popular on college campuses and in general in the community, as you know. You won't have any Durga Maki Aarti during these events. Oftentimes they aren't doing Garba in a circle, right? Which is very important to signify the cosmology of Navratri and the cosmology of the divine feminine within Hinduism. So these are small things. When you chip away at them, you are essentially taking the festival out of the context of it being an actual Hindu celebration, and you're making it more of like a generic cultural celebration. We don't know why we're here. We don't know why we're celebrating, but we're just going to have a party. That's very much the vibe and the atmosphere that you will see at these types of events. And so, again, it was very important for our organization, our campus leaders, to have a space where we could actually delve into these deeper significances.
No, great points. Now, what about the teachings of Sanatana Dharma? And like, for example, Gita. And do you engage in those as well?
Yes, definitely. So some of our chapters have Gita study kind of groups that they've formed. So they'll meet once a week to discuss the Bhagavad Gita. I think some of the things that connect students a little bit better than that, though, are discussions around how Hindu Dharma is still relevant in the 21st century in their own individual lives. And I think this is important because oftentimes we fail to make this case to young people when they're growing up. I think a lot of times students see a lot of the information and a lot of the knowledge, the education that they get about Sanatana Dharma as coming from a historical context, as coming from their parents, as coming from their elders. And they don't necessarily understand how these abstract concepts that they're learning about in Vedanta, or how what they're learning about from whatever sampradaya they may be from, how those wisdom and knowledge traditions are relevant for them. So a lot of our student groups, HSCs, will do weekly or monthly general body meetings where they'll discuss one topic related to how is Hinduism relevant in some aspect of their life, or indeed some aspect of society at large. This is super important because at college, students are really thinking and engaged in how they can be better global citizens, how they can be more plugged in, how they can contribute more to the society around them, right? And so if we can kind of show to students that there are many key principles within their own spiritual tradition that are very useful and very practical knowledge for the world, very practical values for the world to exhibit and to imbibe and to subscribe to, that they will find value in Sanatana Dharma as well. So to answer your question, we don't specifically subscribe to or promote any specific sampradaya. Hindu Students Council is a pan-Hindu organization, but we do try to provide knowledge from all the different kind of points of view, the darshanas within Hinduism, so that students can kind of learn and also exchange ideas from one another on a broad range of topics.
True. That's a good thing, because the thing is, you mentioned Hinduism, and because most of the times the academics in the American universities, mostly who teach Hinduism, are not practitioners of Hinduism. They are just learning from books. And there is a big movement to give basis to Christianity on the basis of Hindu principles. I mean, they're trying to still find relevance for Christianity right now. It's funny that Hindus are trying to find validity or are trying to make Hinduism relevant in 21st century. I mean, the Bhagavad Gita is getting more relevant every day with the kind of mindlessness going around in the society. And the control of mind is the basis of Sanatana Dharma, because the mind, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that mind is the best friend and can be the worst enemy, and which is the simple focus, single focus of yoga, which is being practiced. So is the Hinduism that you teach, do you connect with yoga also in the campuses?
We do, yes, we do. So I think that that's really important, right? Because this word yog or yoga is being desacralized and separated from within the Hindu tradition. So it's important for young people, students who are growing up, to recognize that yoga is one of the six darshanas within Hinduism, that, Ashtanga Yoga, the 8 limbs of yoga, are inherently Hindu, that Patanjali's Yoga Sutras were written in a Hindu context. These are all important things for them to remember. I think oftentimes in Western society in general, I won't even limit it just to campuses, right? Like yoga is reduced to something that is just asana or just postures. And so, yeah, that's one of the things that we do try to inform our students, or tell our students and integrate into also what they do on campus, is to recognize that this is something that's from within their own tradition. And like you said, like all of these things are becoming extremely relevant, which is why indeed American society is embracing yoga in a certain form, at least, right? The parts that they want to pick off and the parts that they see value in, operating from within their own mental framework and from within their own cultural assumptions. But it's very important for us to actually make the case and to make sure that we own these aspects of our own tradition, which I think, without the proper kind of information and without the proper efforts made by within our own community, these things will eventually, at least within the Hindu American context, a lot of these different parts of our tradition will exist in the American consciousness as something that aren't even part of Hinduism. In the yoga space, you see scholars, activists already making the case that yoga is not something that is Hindu at all. You see people making the case that it came from Europe, that it's a form of European gymnastics. And, a lot of these things are, of course, still on the fringe. I think most people recognize that yoga is at least from India, whether or not they recognize that it's part of Hindu spirituality. So it's very important for us to continue to make that case, to make sure that all these different parts of our tradition, again, aren't separated, that the deeper significance and the deeper philosophy that underlies these parts of our tradition don't become separated from the tree. That is Sanatana Dharma.
Very interesting. Like, we regularly see a big campaign and articles coming out that yoga, Christian yoga comes in, and goat yoga also comes in, and many other yogas have come in. You do asana and the goats are walking on your back,
Yeah.
and it's considered very healing for many people.
Yeah,
So
you have beer yoga as well. That's another one that's really popular. I don't know if you've seen that.
I've seen that. I've seen good, and I offered to them, why not have cows walk on their back, because cows are very healing in any way they touch. So the campuses have a lot of issues. We have seen schools, we have seen middle schools, we have seen campuses issues with the guns and other things.
Mm-hmm.
And the one of the principles, and also there is a debate on Hinduism versus Hindutva. That is narrative, again,
Mm-hmm.
an academic narrative being spread out. Does it really affect the image of Hindu Student Council, or do people attack with that Hindutva versus Hinduism kind of thing?
Yes, absolutely. That exact kind of phrasing and framing is often used against our organization, Hindu Students Council, as well as basically every Hindu organization within the community. So I'll just give a little bit of a background behind the issues that students face and kind of how they've changed over time, and where this Hinduism versus Hindutva kind of false binary comes into the equation. So I think for many, many years growing up in the US, for students who came to college at the beginning, one of the major problems was that because of the education that they'd had, or lack of education that they'd had about Hinduism, the connection that they perhaps didn't feel to their own religious tradition, it was often hard for them to actually want to be identifying themselves as Hindu. So when you grow up in the US, there's often an overwhelming sense of shame that washes over you when you identify as Hindu, when people know that you're a Hindu, growing up in grade school. At least that's kind of the prototypical experience of, I think, let's say like the first generation of people in HSC. So for instance, people who would have grown up with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, a movie that shows that, Hindu people are partakers of ritual human sacrifice, people who eat monkey brains for lunch. And these are tropes that students, when they were going to schools in the US, were personally accosted and affronted with when they were in the high school in the 80s. So, from that generation, you see a lot of people who are actually embarrassed, who are actually, because of the narrative about Hinduism, which is reduced to caste, which is reduced to cow worship, which is reduced to people who smell bad, curry. So for these people, it is often difficult for them to want to identify with Hinduism because they haven't actually seen from within the tradition itself what the value is, what true Sanatana Dharma is, which is very unfortunate. And so a lot of the times you'll see that this generation of students and this generation of people, in fact, I would say that this still exists. So this class of students, they don't really want to connect with Sanatana Dharma in any meaningful way. The second issue that a lot of students kind of encounter in college is that there's a lack of social currency when it comes to being Hindu on campus, which is related to the first problem. And what I mean essentially is that you have these Indian student organizations, ISAs, you have many other student organizations on college campuses. So the question then becomes, why should I join Hindu Students Council or whatever Hindu organization indeed exists on my campus? And so one of the important things here is that there's a lack of coolness factor to Hinduism in the broad perception of the campus. That can be a barrier for students as well. If they think that they're joining a group that doesn't really, that doesn't really speak to them as students who want to explore, as students who want to learn, as students who want to grow, and as students who want to have fun, most importantly. If they feel like that this organization won't serve that purpose, then fundamentally they won't want to join. And so that's, I think, another huge barrier. And these are barriers that HSE has always faced. Now, coming to the crux of your question, which was about whether HSC does get attacked as being Hindutva, that does happen. So most recently, a professor at Rutgers posted a infographic where she called Hindu Students Council the militant wing of an organization in India. And so you see this kind of false information being spread about Hindu Students Council, about a student group that has a chapter at this academic's own university. You see false claims being made about the kind of work that we do, that we are trying to brainwash students into all sorts of militant ideologies, all sorts of forms of bigotry and hatred. You see all this around merely Hindu students and other members of the community, indeed, organizing around their Hindu identity, organizing around recognizing that there is Hindu persecution, organizing around the idea and the need to advocate for the Hindu American community. And so this is a very important challenge that's emerged recently on college campuses that is both directed specifically at HSC as the largest Hindu student organization, but also is directed oftentimes at any student who wishes to identify as Hindu. Now, because of these tropes about Hinduism, that Hinduism is inherently casteist, that caste is inseparable from Hinduism, that Hindu Dharma is in some ways anti-feminist, that Hindu Dharma is inherently oppressive, that it's never contributed to society. All of these tropes, which are very easily falsifiable, which form kind of, I think, a lot of the headlines and a lot of the information that students see or first encounter, I would say, when they come to campus. As a result of this, there is this, again, kind of sense of hesitancy for students to want to identify as Hindu on their campus. And these things are even used, for example, to criticize Hindu student organizations for celebrating Holi and Diwali on their campuses. You might be familiar with the Holi Against Hindutva campaign from 2020, which actually argued that Holi was a celebration, a Hindu festival that celebrated the burning of a Dalit Bahujan woman. So you see all of this type of false information, negative stereotypes about Hinduism that are spread. and accusations made against Hindu organizations that are merely trying to organize around issues that affect our community, merely trying to provide the proper perspective, the education to students about what Hinduism really is. And because it doesn't conform to, let's say, the academic or even the colonial narrative about Hinduism, as a result, you see that Hindus, in fact, are being denied the right to define our tradition for ourselves. And this is something that is very important for a student organization, a student-facing organization, and is very important for our community to recognize and be aware of in general and to combat. I apologize for the long answer, but it's definitely an issue that has affected our community a lot in recent times, and has affected students in particular, since they are on campuses which have been an important touch point. The university has been an important touch point for a lot of these, I would say, more extreme notions of how oppressive and how rigid, how patriarchal, hierarchical Hinduism is, which we know to be untrue, but because students are in that kind of maelstrom, it's an important context to understand where a lot of these problems within the student's life comes from.
If people have any doubt, they can read my book, Gold, Glory, and God. It has a lot of history of Abrahamic cultures and how they started. And I still feel that even today, Christianism, I call it, and Islamism and Judaism, all three of them still trying to find their identity. And their way of identity is, and all three of them have different gods. Their gods are not common. Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma is the only culture where it is publicly declared that God is one. And no other culture it is there. And probably Buddhism, which has come from Sanatana Dharma, which was meant to stop the animal killing. That was the only purpose of Buddhism. And it came from Sanatana Dharma. That's the only culture which also has God is one, because it is a part of Sanatana Dharma. It was part of Sanatana Dharma. Nowadays, due to some political reasons, they're trying to separate it out. Now, that's a history. People can read the books, and if they're honest, they'll come to the same conclusion. If you're not honest and you want to do the propaganda, you won't come to the same conclusion. Now, my next question to you will be, now we touched upon some of the important issues here. The academic world in the US sets a narrative. Like Judaism is good, Zionism is bad. Hinduism is good, Hindutva is bad. In Hindi, you call it Hindutva, right? If you and I speak in Hindi, it'll be Hindu Tattva, Hindutva. Means the principle of Hindu, that is Hindu, just means Hindutva. Now, but to give a political spin, that Hinduism is good, but Hindutva. But whenever you attach ism, then automatically you are saying it's a manufactured one. The word ism, you can say in many philosophies, it is done republicanism, democratism, and all kinds of things. It comes to there. Now the point is, why not they use Christianism for themselves, or Abrahamism for themselves, Islamism, or Judaism? So why the word play? It's like the word salad. Nowadays, word salads are very famous nowadays. You know how it goes around with our famous vice president. So the point which I'm trying to ask is that, is this narrative which is being peddled by the academics generally, and I'm not saying you are also in academia and other people, I'm saying this word salad which comes out of academia, it shapes the mindset of the regular non-Hindu American. And like I'll refer to the book of World Religions. You must have studied also in your textbooks in your 10th grade. My son studied it, and I read the whole book on Hinduism and Sanatana Dharma. It's like totally out of the world. It looks like somebody was watching Wikipedia and writing the book. And that is the Ziegler's contribution to stupefy the Americans. Like even more, like Americans, I always pity them because they have not multiple sources for education. So they are into, again, propaganda-based education. Propaganda because somebody is trying to still find their identity. So how do you answer to such kind of things? Now, I'll give one reference of Ziegler. I've written a whole article. You can check it out on Sattology.com. And for the viewers, I'm going to attach that article also in this video. I have taken out screenshots of that book in which it says Krishna created the caste system. Now, caste is a Portuguese word, casta. And In Indian Varna Vyavastha, you know Hindi very well, Varna Vyavastha, there is no such thing as birth-based role, birth-based, identity. But but it has been imposed upon. So European lens, with a European lens, they are looking at Sanatana Dharma or Bhagavad Gita also. So do you think the narrative building by the academia for the purpose of doing something different on the research papers, because I know the reason why they're doing it, if they don't write something new and exciting in the research papers, however big garbage it is, because nobody knows Hinduism, and so they are just writing, regurgitating what their mind and what pasta they ate in the night is comes out in the morning in the form of paper. So what do you think, like, is it narrative building which is the major source of funding for their departments? And like, I won't take the names. You told me not to take the names. I will not
It's
take the
fine.
names. You know, so what do you have to
Yeah.
say on that, please?
Yeah, there's a lot of important points that you made. So I would say that for the purpose, like I've been saying Hinduism a lot in this interview, which is my mistake actually. In HSC, we prefer the term Hindu Dharma to convey that we are Hindu, that we have a Hindu identity, that this is something that we identify with, but that we're not an ism, that we identify with Dharma. Um, Now, as far as the other points that you made, this Hinduism versus Hindutva debate, which I've touched upon a little bit. But I guess as far as what this narrative actually is conveying, I think in a sense, this is a false binary that is created to often peddle Hindu phobia. So let me just describe what I mean. So last year in September of 2021, you had the Dismantling Global Hindutva Conference, organized by a consortium of many different academics and scholars from a wide variety of different and reputed institutions, right? Princeton, Columbia, Harvard, Cornell, etc., and many different universities. I think there were something like 40 to 50 different universities that were, or university departments actually, that were co-sponsoring this conference. And one of the things that they kept saying is that we aren't criticizing Hinduism, we're criticizing Hindutva. All the Hindu American organizations that are concerned and that are writing letters to universities arguing that this is dangerous for this speech to be sanctioned and to be endorsed by university bodies. All of these organizations are either grossly misinformed or are part of Hindutva. They are Hindu nationalist bodies in the US. They are peddling anti-Muslim bigotry, et cetera, et cetera. They are part of the problem, so it's not surprising that they are claiming that we are doing something that is Hinduphobic, when in fact, all we are doing is criticizing militant Hindu ideology, militant Hindutva. But if you actually look at what was said at the conference, and I don't know if I'm sure you've had the chance to do it, but for the benefit of your viewers, there's many statements made that actually criticize Hindu identity and Hinduism itself. For instance, one of the speakers says that the Hindutva project is to actually spread the tentacles of Hinduism into every society. Now, if you start to dissect what this statement actually means, what this person is clearly, I mean, the clear implication is that spreading Hinduism or creating awareness about Hinduism or giving people the opportunity to adopt, celebrate, and practice Hinduism is something that is inherently bad, is something that is inherently dangerous, and that is unambiguously bigoted, in my opinion. And I think in any free-thinking, rational person's opinion, suggesting that trying to celebrate your own religious tradition and making sure that it has a place in the U.S., that is somehow a Hindutva project, which is militant and fascist in nature, is just completely illogical and very dangerous and xenophobic. So you have other statements made during the conference, for instance, also listing out Hindu surnames, Sharma, Iyer, Trivedi, Kompella, Banerjee, and suggesting that all of these people are party of a conspiracy of corporate malignant Brahmanism. You also have one speaker claiming that Hinduism has not contributed anything to the world, and that it will, in fact, not allow us to attain the highest ideals of democracy, of freedom, and brotherhood. And think about how dangerous that is to say, actually, at a conference organized by American and Canadian universities. You are essentially endorsing the view that Hinduism is anti-democratic and is a threat to democracy in the US. I mean, I don't understand how people don't see through the fact that this is not a discussion about social justice. This is not a discussion about criticizing any type of militant ideology. This is out and out demonizing anyone who identifies as Hindu and problematizing any expression of Hindu identity, not only at the university, but in general within American society, at least. So these things are very dangerous. And so basically what I'm trying to underline is that this Hinduism versus Hindutva binary that's been created recently doesn't really exist. It's something that is a figment of a lot of these ideologues' imagination or their kind of political project that is used to that gives them the cover, I would say, to criticize and to basically wholesale demonize the Hindu community and Hindu American and Hindu identity under the guise of speaking for social justice. This is very dangerous and very important for our community to identify and start to combat. Yeah, sorry, did you have another something that you wanted to come back with?
No, one of the last points you said, you continue, finish your thought actually. You're speaking something.
Yeah, no, so I was just gonna say, like, in some ways, I think that a lot of these discussions and a lot of these debates that we have on college campuses about Hinduism versus Hindutva are in a sense misguided. In some cases, also you have people who don't understand what the academic means when they say Hindutva, and so you'll get people being asked, well, do you identify with Hindutva? And the person will say, yeah, of course, I'm a Hindu person. Hindutva is just the essence of my culture, my spiritual heritage, and my spiritual practice. So yeah, of course, I identify with Hindutva. And then, of course, this type of statement is then used to spread this false notion that the diaspora in particular is somehow in the throes of supporting fascism in India. And so you see that a lot of this narrative and a lot of what is being peddled about our community is not, of course, on any type of solid foundation, but has an ulterior motive to it.
One thing really comes to the mind is the notion which is being spread and which comes from the Middle East, actually, Arab dictionary. Hindus are black, ugly, and Hindus are dark. Obviously, I'm proud of my skin color, by the way. Everyone gets tan to get my skin color, and the Hindus are dirty,
Yeah.
And little people know that the true Hindu followers. I mean, I'm not talking about generally, but majority of the Hindus, 1.2 billion Hindus are there, and in the world, they are, and I'm also including people with a different skin color. They're also Hindus in other continents. Now, majority of them at least take bath twice or thrice a day. Majority of them, because of their puja rituals, their worship, and they have to follow a certain cleanliness. Very clean people, and at the same time, if anyone watches Bollywood movies, you can see all the Hindus, they all look very good, very beautiful. But when I come here, generally in the campuses, like you correctly said, that the Hindus are, that's the impression which is being taught from childhood about Hindus. Cow worshippers, cow urine drinkers. Now, most of the Arab world drinks camel piss. They drink that. Camel urine is sold in Saudi Arabian airports. Now, does anyone call them like that? That they are urine drinkers? No, it is not. It is a drink over there being sold. So these are all the aspersions taught, so that there is no mingling of their population with Hindus, because Hinduism is addictive. Sanatana Dharma is addictive. Once people start yoga, for the rest of their life, they can't leave it. It's like that. And that's why they are making strategies to disconnect yoga from Hinduism, or to give a bad aspersions. Like one of the very classical things, one of my students, he's from Syria, and she told me that generally they were taught that the Hindus are generally from childhood, that Hindus are dirty, then don't mix with them, you'll destroy your race. And so I found it. I said, "Do you watch Bollywood movies?" She said, "Yes, that's the only movies we see in the Middle East." And say, "How can you say like that?" And then her mind was that, "Oh, they are Muslims mostly." I said, "No, most of the modern heroes are not Muslims. They're all Hindus. And Hindu men are generally tall, and Hindu women are the rights. There's no." So I'm just trying to say is that this notion, it exists in the campuses. Is it right? This kind of notion.
Yeah, I mean, I think it exists in all facets of American society, not just the campus in particular. So I'll say you might know the NCRI, which is a research lab in Rutgers University,
Yes.
uh, came out with a recent study about the tropes about Hindus uh, that exist in the digital space. So that report your viewers can read on the NCRI's website. But one of the basic findings is very much what you're suggesting, which is that in a large study of a sample of millions of tweets, one of the major tropes that we found was that Hindus are being called dirty, filthy, and barbaric. This is a propaganda that's been used, a form of anti-Hindu disinformation, of Hinduphobia, that's been used against our community for literally centuries. And it's important for us to recognize that. One of the ways in which this trope came across to us in particular was that there's a repeated association of Hindus with defecation. So you might be familiar with this new, this anti-Hindu slur that's used, Pajit. Pajit, we've seen on social media, has increased in usage many fold. And Bajit is used to connote someone who defecates in the street. And it's an epithet that's used to describe Indian people in general. But actually, what our research found using machine learning is that this specific term is very closely linked to Hindu. So much so that if you remove the Hindu from Bajit, you don't end up with any of these tropes about Indians or whoever you're talking about being dirty, filthy, or barbaric. So these are tropes that are inbuilt into the Western consciousness about Hindus. It's not surprising that we saw a lot of stories about these 5 or 6 people in India using excrement to ward off COVID. I don't know if you remember these stories that were published in Western media outlets. There's this kind of perverse fascination with all this dirtiness and filthiness that exists in India. There's this desire to showcase that India is a place that is still backwards through this trope. So I think that that's something that is very much built into our consciousness. And again, it's something that makes people not want to identify with their culture and with their tradition. If your culture is something that is backwards, filthy, and barbaric, why would you want to identify with it, right? And I would say that nowadays people are more subtle about it. You won't find someone going around and actually saying this in boldface the way that the British colonizers used to. But you will, as I mentioned, like by way of selection of stories that news agencies will use, it does showcase that there is still this underlying kind of notion within the West. At least that's what I think it reveals based on what we see published about India in the Western press. That these stereotypes about India and about Hinduism still very much exist in our country's psyche as a whole.
Well, I mean, all those kind of epithets can be used for many people also. San Francisco, Market Street, it's all open defecation area right now. The entirely San Francisco downtown, LA downtown, many downtowns are converted into that. Seattle has a big population, and I live in San Diego. That is also happening here too. So it's something like which is becoming a normal American culture. So I think what we need to where we stand as a community, and I must say we are growing stronger. More than 65 million Americans practice yoga, including Muslims, including Christians, including Jews. all of them practice yoga. So practically you're all stepping into the Hinduism fold. So it's a kind of a, and also one thing I see here, we run Sattology courses in every campuses, and most of the many campuses we are there, 226 campuses we are there, and we find that we are not doing a good job of teaching Bhagavad Gita.
Mhm.
And because Bhagavad Gita is the only book which is meant for a human. It has no community, it has nothing. It is meant for the entire human society. Do you think that we can do something more in that area?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think one of the things that's important to do is to connect with, for students to connect with spiritual organizations in the area that can help them do this, right? So like Hindu Students Council doesn't typically run courses to teach the Gita because we're a student driven organization. And so it would be a little bit strange for a student to teach other students about the Gita. Although we did have a Mahabharat class during COVID and a Gita study class during COVID as well. But again, these are not courses that are taught by somebody who you would call an expert, an acharya, or a guru. So it's important, I think, for us and for other Hindu groups, for Hindu students in general, if you're an individual, to connect with the resources that exist within our community. And I think this is a crucial link that we need to work on as a community, is bringing the resources and the wisdom that exists within our institutions, within our mandirs, to different facets of society. And I think, quite honestly, this is a two-way street. The mandirs in the community, I think, tend to be more insular. They tend to focus on things that are very safe, with of course many exceptions. I'm not saying that there aren't mandirs who are doing great outreach to the community and also outside the community. But I think, in general, compared to other traditions and other communities in the U.S., mandirs and our other institutions tend to be very insular. And so, and of course, students on college campuses here also tend to be very insular, just by the very nature of studying in kind of a closed loop, in a very self-contained environment. If you have everything you need in a college campus, you have your dorm, you have your food, you have your studies. Students don't really leave campus very often. And so it's an important challenge, I think, that we've worked on over the years and have had success in certain cases, like, for instance, establishing a relationship between our Hindu Students Council chapter at the University of Pittsburgh and the local mandir there. So these types of, I think, key links that we can help create to create that transmission of knowledge of Gita or of other type of wisdom within Sanatana Dharma is important. It's important for also the mandir also, by the way, right? Because the mandirs are always concerned about the next generation not wanting to come to the temple. And so it's important for both sides to understand the value proposition in that linkage and in that relationship.
Thank you so much, Parth. And I'm going to bring Parth back because all of you want to hear him. He's got mesmerizing voice, and you want to see the good content coming out of him. And we'll bring him on. And those of you asking in Hindi from the US, I must tell you that this show is for the Americans. So we have to speak in English, otherwise people won't understand what we are saying. And but we'll do a Hindi show also with him. And thank you so much, Parth, for coming. And those of you who would like to check out, you can check out Sattology on Amazon. You'll see all our books over there. And also you can also subscribe to this channel and know all these kind of issues which face the Indian American community. We are Americans and also Hindu, so which is a very proud thing to say, that this country offers us the freedom to choose the religion just like India. If this country was not offering people freedom of religion, then this country won't be rich. Silicon Valley is made up of, if you remove Indians from Silicon Valley is nothing, practically nothing. So thank you so much, Partha. And thank you so much to the viewers for watching the show. And I'll see you next time. Namaste.
Namaste.